the meal that altered everything. One evening, a seemingly ordinary dinner transformed into the instant that drastically shifted my marriage. I recall laughing at my own spouse while we were seated at the dining table in the company of our dearest friends. In front of everyone, I accusingly labeled him as jealous. At that moment, I reveled in triumph, believing I had just prevailed in an argument. Haven't you ever uttered words to assert dominance, to show strength, or to sidestep acknowledging potential errors? If so, then pay close attention, for what transpired next was sparked by a single statement, and it reshaped our relationship. That night was intended to be flawless. The dining table was elegantly set. Soft candlelight danced around the room while subtle music hummed in the background. I had extended invitations to a select group of friends for dinner. Among them was my trusted confidant, Ryan. Yes, that Ryan, the male friend whom my husband had always felt uneasy around. For 12 years, Ryan and I had been companions before my marriage, prior to the wedding, and before life assumed its current form. He aided me in transitioning between residences, stayed by my side during prolonged days when my father was unwell, and was the individual who responded to my calls late at night when existence felt oppressive. To me, Ryan appeared as kin, yet to my spouse, he consistently remained an enigma left unresolved. In the initial stages, my husband endeavored sincerely to be amiable. He displayed a smile when Ryan was present, grasped his hand, and inquired about work and life. However, I occasionally observed subtle signs of discomfort, a tensing of the jaw, a far-off gaze, an abrupt silence whenever Ryan and I reminisced over past events. Nonetheless, I rationalized these occurrences as his predicament, not mine. "Don't be insecure," I frequently told myself. And that night at dinner, I decided to voice those very words aloud. During dinner, Ryan shared a tale from an old road trip, causing everyone to chuckle. I playfully elbowed him. However, my husband remained silent, taking a sip of water instead. Ryan teased, "Watch out, pal, I've known her longer than you." More laughter ensued, except from my husband. It was then that I made my mistake. I rolled my eyes and said, "Oh, come on, don't tell me you're jealous again," loud enough for everyone to hear. I even chuckled as I spoke. "Jealous of Ryan? Seriously? He's just my best friend. You're overreacting." A prolonged silence settled, a quiet one that lingered a bit too long. My husband delicately placed his cutlery on the table, not angrily or forcefully, but calmly. His gaze fell upon me, and while I was preoccupied with defending myself, I failed to notice the pain etched across his face. It wasn't anger, it was deep, quiet hurt. He cleared his throat and said calmly, "I don't harbor jealousy towards him." A smirk tugged at the corners of my lips. "Indeed, for it seems you harbor a touch of envy." He nodded once before uttering words that would linger in my memory. "I'm not jealous of him. I am mourning the protection you extend to him, but not me." A hush fell over the room, and my smile faded. "What do you mean by that?" I asked, a hint of laughter still clinging to my voice as I struggled to maintain control of the situation. He did not raise his voice or accuse. Instead, he clarified, "It implies that when I express discomfort, you label me insecure. However, if Ryan expresses any discomfort, you swiftly defend him." I opened my mouth to object, but he continued unabated. "It suggests that people are told I am jealous, yet no one has ever asked why I feel the way I do." At this point, Ryan squirmed in his seat. The story progressed, with all rights freely available. Soft candlelight illuminated the room, tension filling the air and a heavy quietness enveloping it all. My spouse continued speaking. "I never wished to compete with him," he stated calmly. "I never have." He momentarily fell silent. "All I ever wanted was to feel like your husband, not the third wheel at our own dinner table." His words resonated deeply within me, causing a sudden jolt. I attempted to dismiss them with a laugh, saying, "You're overreacting," but even I could hear the uncertainty in my voice this time. He gently shook his head. "No, I've remained quiet," he replied softly. "That's different." It was then that I realized, for the first time that evening, I wasn't winning anything. He then politely turned to Ryan. "I value your friendship," my spouse said sincerely. "I truly do. But when my wife confides in you things she doesn't even share with me, when she contacts you before she speaks to me, when she disregards my feelings just to protect yours." He paused and looked straight at me. "That's not about jealousy, it's about setting limits." The statement hung heavily in the room. "Limits." Ryan shifted uneasily and mumbled about needing some outside air. One by one, our companions fabricated excuses and stealthily departed. Soon the room was vacant, save for us two. The candles continued to flicker. Untouched food lay on the table. The quiet seemed tangible, almost palpable. Within me, feelings clashed. Anger, humiliation, and a discomfort from being uncovered swirled together. "How could you say all that in front of everyone?" I retorted. He looked drained. Countless times have I attempted to express this to you privately, he countered. I stumbled, realizing he was correct. He had tried. There were instances where he softly voiced, "Sometimes it seems like you favor him." And my response was always consistent. "You're giving too much thought, perhaps." Previously, he expressed discomfort about you canceling plans for him to meet someone else. You retorted defensively, "He requires me, stop being overbearing." Instead of empathizing, your feelings were dismissed. He sighed wearily and quietly remarked, "I don't want you to lose touch with your friend, I just don't want to be pushed aside in your life." In that instant, something within me shattered. It struck me then that I had invested so much energy defending myself without considering the possibility of causing him pain. These are two vastly different scenarios. I gradually sat down. "Do you genuinely believe I prioritize him over you?" I inquired. Without hesitation, he answered affirmatively. That solitary word seemed more weighty than all else said that evening. He wasn't yelling or blaming. He was merely confident, and conviction can be intimidating. Recollections started flooding my mind. The late-night phone conversations with Ryan that I stepped out for, which I took outside. My private jokes with him I hadn't felt the need to clarify. When I told my spouse, "You wouldn't get it," his replies were met with disregard. Whenever someone hinted at Ryan possibly overstepping bounds, I leaped to his defense swiftly. However, when my husband expressed unease, I dismissed it as envy without a second thought. Why had I so hastily shielded one individual and questioned the other? My spouse's voice softened again. "When you belittle me for being jealous, it doesn't make me feel secure. It makes me feel insignificant. Insignificant." This word pierced something within me. I never wished him to feel that way. I believed I was embodying modernity, confidence, and open-mindedness. Yet perhaps I had merely been defensive. "I trust you," he said gently, "but I need to be respected as well." Tears threatened behind my eyes, and I despised the fact that this moment was necessary for me to grasp his long-standing message. It pained me to acknowledge that it took public humiliation for me to finally listen. My spouse, without a word, rose from his seat and started collecting dishes from the table, not out of anger but in quiet resignation and weariness. It was then that I grasped something that filled me with fear more profoundly than jealousy ever could. He wasn't quarreling anymore, he was withdrawing. This realization triggered a wave of dread. Disputes can be mended, but silence can erode a bond. "Wait," I breathed softly. He halted. "I'm sorry." The words tasted foreign on my tongue, heavy, sincere, authentic. There was no immediate reply, so I pressed on. "I thought that if I conceded you were correct, it meant I was at fault. I didn't want to be the antagonist." He regarded me intently and murmured gently. This wasn't about being in the right or wrong. It was about feeling secure together. Secure. In that instant, I comprehended something agonizing. He hadn't felt secure expressing his apprehensions with me. Since he tried, I'd mocked them, turning them into jokes, labels, or allegations of jealousy. Approached him, softly grasped his hand. "I hadn't noticed it before, but I do now," I confessed. In this instance, my words held sincerity. For hours that night, we spoke without quarrel or derision, only honesty. He conveyed the pain caused by my comparisons to Ryan and the discomfort of my shared private disputes with others. Each time I dismissed his feelings with, "You're just jealous." It eroded his self-assurance bit by bit. This time I listened not merely to respond, but to truly comprehend. I assured him my actions were never intended as disrespect. Ryan was indeed a friend. However, fear of losing an old friendship had led me to confuse loyalty with boundarylessness. They are distinct entities. While friendship is valuable, marriage requires sheltering. That night, I recognized I had been shielding the wrong thing. The following morning, I contacted Ryan without incident. In straightforward terms, I voiced my desire to establish new boundaries. Fewer late-night conversations, avoiding discussions about personal marital issues, and giving him more personal space. Ryan was silent for a while before he commented surprisingly, "I had been wondering when you'd recognize that." He confessed he sometimes felt uncomfortable. He never aimed to intrude upon our relationship. He added softly, indicating I may have been clinging too much to the past. After our conversation ended, I felt liberated, not because we lost contact, but because I gained insight into something crucial. My husband was never my adversary, he just desired more attention. There's a distinction between jealousy and feeling displaced, and I had overlooked that line. A week later, my husband and I dined together without guests, and the change was palpable. He looked at me with a warmth I hadn't seen in months, relaxed, confident, tranquil, and cherished. Yes, that's the term, selected, because love isn't merely about faith. It also involves making the other person feel selected, even when others are present in your life. I used to think mocking him made me appear self-assured, but genuine self-assurance is expressing, your feelings matter. If I could turn back the clock to that dinner table, I wouldn't laugh. Instead, I would ask a straightforward question. Help me comprehend. Occasionally, the person we assume is envious is merely seeking reassurance that they are not overlooked. So if you're currently listening to this story and have ever brushed off someone's feelings as insecurity, take a moment to reflect. Ask yourself one question. Are they genuinely envious, or are they concerned about losing you? This single question might safeguard your relationship. It nearly ruined mine. And trust me, you wouldn't want to wait until silence prevails before you finally grasp the truth.